We're going to cover 5 key areas: what purpose-driven bookkeeping really means, how to turn numbers into a story you can understand, how to know if your books are helping or hurting your big goals, why compliance is the starting point and not the finish line, and how to keep your vision on track. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Beyond Your Books, a small business growth podcast. In a few minutes, I want to talk to you about books with purpose, the topic of today's podcast. However, this being the first episode, I think it makes sense for me to share some of my own journey. Who am I? How did I end up here? Why should you bother listening to me? Then I'll spend a few minutes explaining why my firm's tagline is Books with Your Purpose in Mind. I'd say my own professional journey is about as unorthodox as they come. Right out of college, I was an Army logistics officer for 5 years. Next, I went from being a captain in the Army to a part-time high school intern at my church. That turned into a 17-year stint as a pastor at that church, during which time I earned a Master's of Divinity with a leadership emphasis. I led a staff of more than 20 people, a congregation of 1,000, hundreds of volunteers, and a 7-figure budget. Oh yeah, and towards the end of that time, I started a PhD program in organizational leadership. When I completed my PhD, I went to work with a good friend and PhD cohort mate at Oracle, doing sales enablement. And we did all kinds of geeky PhD analytics during a 2-year run there before we started a company together and did various kinds of sales and business consulting for a few years. One of my clients during that time was an accounting firm whose clients were all business owners. I ended up joining the staff of that firm as a practice manager and business consultant, and ultimately became a client manager as well. When I took on that role, I became an enrolled agent with the IRS so I could do taxes and tax planning. During my 7 years there, I helped the firm double in revenue while we transitioned from a local firm with all local staff to a national client footprint, a globally distributed, fully virtual staff of over 20 people in 4 countries and 6 or 7 states. After being an employee during that time, my entrepreneurial juices really started flowing again. So I jumped out on my own, at first doing more business and growth consulting, and now as the owner of Telos Bookkeeping. I've learned quite a bit in those 30 plus years about leading people and building organizations, how to and how not to. I'm a lifelong learner, and the one thing that I've learned about myself is that the threads that have tied my adult life together have been learning, leadership, and service. I started this podcast so I can serve other small business owners with things I've learned and things I'm learning, mostly about owning and growing a business and how the financial management fits into all of that, but not exclusively finances. I'll occasionally have guests, other small business owners, on the podcast so we can learn together from them. And if you have topics you want me to discuss, let me know and we can learn and grow together. And while the title of this podcast is Beyond Your Books, I do want to take some time in this episode to talk about books with purpose. If you've ever thought, my books are up to date, so why do I still feel in the dark? Well, you're not alone. Most business owners see bookkeeping as a chore or a compliance checkbox. But here's the truth. Your books can be one of the most powerful strategic tools in your business if they're aligned with your purpose. Today, I'll show you how to make that shift. We're going to cover 5 key areas: what purpose-driven bookkeeping really means, how to turn numbers into a story you can understand, how to know if your books are helping or hurting your big goals, why compliance is the starting point and not the finish line, and how to keep your vision on track day after day. By the end, you'll see how your numbers can stop being a stress point and start being a growth engine. So let me start with this question. What does purpose-driven bookkeeping really mean? When I say books with your purpose in mind, what am I saying? Well, most bookkeeping just records the past. Transactions, reconciliations, reports, they're important, yes, but are they strategic? Not so much. Purpose-driven bookkeeping flips that script. It asks, Are your financial systems helping you move toward your vision? Here's a sample of what that could look like. Customizing your chart of accounts so it reflects your real business model, not some generic template. Tracking KPIs that matter to your goals, like customer acquisition cost if you're growth focused, or cash reserves if your priority is stability. And making sure that those reports don't just show numbers, they show meaning. That's what alignment looks like. Because when your books are aligned with your goals, they become a tool for building the business that you want, not just surviving tax season. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, I worked with a business owner who wanted to sell his practice. He wanted to be able to easily show a prospective buyer a clear picture of all of the owner's discretionary income right from his income statement. So we reworked his chart of accounts so that all the owner perks, travel, education, etc., as well as his salary, retirement, and benefits, all showed up in the same section of his income statement. That gave a prospective buyer a very clear picture of the buyer's potential benefit, not just from the net income of the business, but all of the owner's benefit without having to dig for it. So your numbers do tell a story. The question is, do you know how to read that story? Too many owners get their P&L and think, well, the profit looks okay, or the expenses seem fine, and then it just goes on a shelf or in the recycling bin. But real insight is hidden in the trends. Why is my profit up? What expense is growing faster than revenue? What does that mean for your purpose? This is the interpretation that matters. And at Telos, our consultations with our clients are really financial clarity sessions every month or quarter, not just to report, but to translate the numbers into a story that the owner can act on. Here's a real-world story. A client came to me saying, I don't understand my reports. They don't tell me anything. It says I have net income, but my cash is always tight. The revenue was growing and the cash flow was tight. But I explained to them that a common problem they were experiencing, but is one that's hidden on the P&L, is loan payments. The client had several loans they were paying on each month. The cash going out for loan payments definitely impacts cash flow, but doesn't really show up on the P&L because, except for the interest portion of the payment, loan repayments are not expense items on the P&L. They're on the balance sheet, which even fewer business owners seem to pay attention to, let alone understand. So once they saw the story in the numbers, they were able to change their expectations, and we were able to strategize ways to create more cushion in their cash flow. So my question is, are your books helping or hurting your big goals? Because your books are never neutral. They're either helping you reach your goals or they're quietly sabotaging them. And here's why. If your reporting doesn't match your strategy, you make decisions in the dark. You might think you can afford something when you can't. Or worse, you stop investing in what matters the most. Maybe you can relate to this story. A frustrated business owner can't understand why his business is not growing. The books look fine on paper, but a deeper analysis revealed they were spending heavily on a product line that was actually losing money. And no one caught it because the reports had all the expenses, all the business line expenses lumped together. But by breaking the numbers out by line of business, they were able to see and then cut the unprofitable product and double down on the winner. The result, supercharged growth. Let me take a moment to just talk about compliance versus value. Why purposeful books build a strong business is because compliance is only the starting line, not the finish line. Tax-ready books, they keep you legal, but they don't build value necessarily. Value-driven bookkeeping answers bigger questions. Am I building a business that's less dependent on me? Am I tracking what an investor or buyer will care about someday? At Telos, we integrate value builder principles into every client conversation because every dollar you track or don't, and every strategic decision you make impacts the long-term worth of your business. Here's a typical example. Your P&L normally doesn't differentiate between recurring revenue and one-off revenue. But if you're trying to sell, that differentiation is a critical consideration that significantly impacts your sales multiple. You can be doing everything right for tax season, but when you start talking about selling, it makes sense to adjust your financial reports to highlight aspects that impact your selling price, like recurring revenue. A purpose-driven bookkeeper can rebuild your income statement to highlight that aspect of revenue to help drive up your multiple. So, how do you keep all of this aligned that I've been talking about? You need rhythms, systems, and accountability. We create monthly financial rhythms that keep your vision front and center. Regular cash flow reviews, KPI dashboards that track what matters most, quarterly strategy check-ins to adjust as your goals evolve. My question is, are you willing to invest time working on your business? One thing that frustrates purpose-driven accountants the world over is business owners who aren't willing to invest time working on their business because they're too busy working in their business. But even taking just a couple of hours a month to review reports and dashboards, to meet with your accounting professional, to ensure that you understand the story that your reports are telling, it will pay massive dividends for you in the end. It's one of the keys to unlock not just growth and profitability of the business, but also freedom and balance for the business owner. Getting into a rhythm of reviewing monthly reports and dashboards, as well as quarterly consulting, will radically change the outlook, perspective, and insight of the business owner. See, bookkeeping, it's not just about numbers, it's about alignment. And when your books reflect your purpose, everything changes. Your decisions, your growth, and your peace of mind. That was a really long-winded explanation of why I started Telos Bookkeeping. Telos means ultimate purpose. Another definition of telos is a dream fulfilled. For many of us, owning a successful small business that provides real value and generates money and freedom and opportunity for the business owner, that is the dream. I know it's mine. Through Telos Bookkeeping and this podcast, I hope to help your telos, your ultimate purpose for your business, become a dream fulfilled. Thanks for watching. If this episode sparked ideas or brought value to your journey, hit subscribe here for more insights that empower small businesses to thrive with purpose. Dive into more episodes here to keep learning, growing, and making an impact. See you next time.